Hello and welcome to the Community Partners broadcast series. My name is Lucy Putnam and I'm the Director of Professional Development and Training at Community Partners. And today I'm going to be talking to you about ways to make remote services work for you. Since the COVID crisis started, many of us are finding that services that we're used to receiving in person are now being offered to us remotely. And that's made a lot of people feel uncomfortable and is adding some stress to their thinking about the services. These may be services you receive through Community Partners, or they may be services that you receive through other providers such as healthcare providers, financial services, banking, all sorts of different things. So today I've got a few tips for you that hopefully will help you feel more comfortable and confident when using remote services. These tips are in three general areas. The first is things you can do prior to your actual service taking place. I've got some other tips you can use during your service, and then some things you can do after your service to hopefully make the next service that you receive go even better than the first. So in the first area, things you can do before your service meeting, there are a few things that you can do to get ready. So we've been hearing a lot of people that have concerns about the actual use of the technology. So some things you can do in this area, first of all, speak with your service provider about the specific worries that you have about the type of technology that they're asking you to use. You may have concerns about privacy. You may have concerns about actually using that type of technology, such as video conferencing. It could be a phone call, or it could be use of a computer or tablet. You may have concerns about the way that the services may feel different because there's not that in-person connection that you get from an actual service that you're receiving with somebody versus remotely. And there may be other areas that you have concerns about as well. But if you talk with your service provider about those concerns and let them know what those specific concerns are, then they can give you answers and give you a better idea of what to expect and how that service will feel when you actually receive it. And that makes us all feel more confident. The next thing you can do is to ask what things will be the same or different with a remote service versus an in-person service. And again, you can feel more confident knowing what to expect. And there are a lot of things that are similar, but there may be some differences. And again, it's helpful to know what those are. The next tip is to try to practice using the technology if you're uncomfortable with it before your actual meeting takes place. So you can do this in a couple of ways. First, you may have friends or family that feel more confident in using this types of technology, and you may be able to practice with them. Or if it's a video conference, for example, you'll receive a link from your service provider for the meeting prior to the meeting starting. And you can actually practice using that link and try getting to the actual meeting site before the meeting takes place. And this way, if you have problems, maybe you can find a way to resolve those before the actual meeting. But again, it will help you feel more confident if you're able to get there and see how it all works. The final tip in this area is to create a technology backup plan with your provider. So what this means is that you have a way to get in touch with them, an alternative way, in case the way that you plan to have your remote meeting does not work out. So for example, if it's a video conference and you're not able to get through to the video conference meeting, you would have a phone number that you could call so that you can get in touch with your service provider, problem solve, and hopefully be able to have your meeting take place either over the phone or work out the kinks so you can make the remote service through video conference work. The next area to consider are some things you can do to get ready for the meeting. So a few of the tips that I have for you is, first of all, be sure to make a note of the time of your session in the same way you would if it was an office-based session. So that is putting it in your planner. Maybe you give yourself a reminder on your phone, or maybe you write it on a calendar. But something so you know when it's going to take place and you're ready for the meeting when it actually starts. The next thing is to make a list for yourself about the things you want to talk about. Because many people feel a little more stress in using a remote service, sometimes that causes us not to remember as much of the things we wanted to talk about as we might otherwise have done with an in-person service. So if you write on that list the things you want to talk about. And these may be things that are related to what you normally would talk about during a session with that provider, or they may be things that are related to COVID-19 crisis, or some other new challenges that have come up with all the changes that have taken place recently. And your service providers want to know about those things as well, because they probably impact the topic that you're talking to that service provider about as well. So be sure to include those things. And then just prior to your meeting taking place, take a moment to review that list so that it's fresh in your mind and you have a better chance then of bringing up those things that are important to you and not forgetting them. And then the last area that I have a tip for you in is think about the space where your remote service is going to take place. And be sure to get that ready prior to the actual meeting. Gather the things you need. It may be a private space. It may be that you have to get your technology ready. So be sure whatever device you're using is turned on. Think about whether it needs to be charged or plugged in. If there's that link that you have to, or a phone number to actually connect to the service, be sure you have that ready. That list that we just talked about, that you've made of things you want to talk about, have that on hand so you can refer to it during the meeting itself. That backup plan that we talked about, that so you know if the plan for connecting to the service doesn't work out, you have another way to connect to your provider. Be sure to have that on hand. And then think about the other things that will make you feel comfortable during that meeting, such as a beverage, maybe a snack. Maybe there's a pillow that you put in your chair. So again, you can feel as comfortable as possible when the actual meeting starts. Now, during your meeting, there are a few things you can do, again, to help it go successfully for you. So the first thing is, if you have any trouble connecting at all, be sure to use that backup plan to connect with your service provider. You don't have to wait until you really feel stressed out, but if you're having trouble connecting with them, use the backup plan, and then that way they'll be able to help you problem solve. Next, if you have any trouble with the audio or video, be sure to let your service provider know that as well. Sometimes on a phone call, the connection can be scratchy or there's an echo. It's okay to mention that. Don't feel that you have to suffer through. If you have trouble with the video or audio in a video conference, again, let your service provider know, and they can help adjust things. So again, that meeting will feel as comfortable as possible and you'll be able to hear and see well during the meeting. If anything is making you uncomfortable during the service, be sure to bring that up as well. Again, your service provider wants to know so they can help you problem solve. Their goal is for this meeting to be successful for you and for you to feel it's as useful as an in-person meeting. And lastly, sometimes with remote services, it's a lot harder to know when to interject, to put things into a conversation. So this is because we don't have all the nonverbal cues that we often get in an in-person meeting. So in these situations, it may be hard for you to know when you can say something that you want to bring up in a meeting, and it may be hard for your service provider to know exactly when you may want to say something. So you may have to speak up a bit more and just say, hey, there's something I wanted to talk about. And your service provider, again, will appreciate that because there's a little more difficulty for both of you. That is one of the differences. And then after your service, there's a few tips I have for that area as well. So the first thing is to take a few minutes after the service to consider how it was for you. What went well? What were challenges for you? What were the things you actually didn't like? And make a note of those things, because then you can tell your service provider about them. And again, you may be able to find ways to make adjustments so the next service feels more comfortable for you. Your service provider will really appreciate this feedback. They really want to make this experience as helpful for you as possible. So the more you can tell them what your needs are, the better the service will go for both of you. And then we talked about making that list of things that you want to talk about in your next service from that person. Be sure to keep that list going, because there may be things that come up in the days or weeks prior to the next time you meet with that person. And with that list available, you can jot them down and then you'll remember them for your next meeting. Well, that's it for today's broadcast. I hope these tips have been helpful to you. If you're enjoying the Community Partners broadcast series, be sure to like our Facebook page or subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that way you'll get notifications of when the next broadcasts in our series are posted. Thank you so much.